Hello everyone, this is Meredith with Fortitude Immigration Consulting. I just wanted to do a brief video due to the COVID travel ban measures and some confusion in terminology. A lot of information is changing and it's ever evolving, so you need to be patient with IRCC as they are trying to update everything as fast as they can due to the change in process and the virus. So, as of the update yesterday and based on the travel ban and exclusions, let's talk about what those are. So yesterday, the RCAC and federal government put out a new special measures where they are now allowing the temporary foreign workers, some international students, and approved permanent residents who have yet landed or are now able to enter Canada. So what that means is if you had already received your study visa before March 18th, you are allowed to now enter Canada as part of the exemption. Now, that's what they mean by the word some international students, meaning that if you were not approved before March 18th, before the ban, and you got your approval after that, you then would not be part of the exemption and would not be allowed to come to Canada. So if you received your study visa prior to March 18th, you are now allowed to enter Canada. That also means anybody who's on an existing study visa who left the country for visiting family or vacation are also now allowed to enter Canada. Now let's go to the temporary foreign workers clause. The temporary foreign workers are exempt from coming to Canada if you have already received your landing documents as well, your work visa, and that doesn't have a date either, which exempts it. So what they're saying is if you're a temporary foreign worker and you have approved to come to Canada, you can still come to Canada now and allowed to travel. So that means that if you've already established yourself in Canada as a temporary foreign worker and left and went on vacation or for whatever purpose, you can now return back to Canada. Or if you've made other arrangements to travel due to the restrictions and you're coming to Canada to work and you've been offered employment and then employment still exists, or you've made Canada your home, you can still travel to Canada. Now, they're definitely going to give special industries such as agriculture, food processing, health, and transportation emergency services leeway. Of course, they would be continuously part of the exemption. So I think when people are confused is that yes, if you're a temporary foreign worker who were already established in Canada or who had made arrangements to come to Canada to work before the travel rate restrictions were put into place, you can come to Canada. So that means anybody who's already been approved for a temporary work status, you can now enter Canada. That also applies to anybody who's on an intra-company transfer, or if you are on a IEC, that's your holiday visa, you can still come to Canada as well prior to the ban because you have already had attempted to make Canada your home before the ban took place. So you are also part of that exemption. Now, let's go back to some of the other criteria. Now, people are confused by what they mean by intermediate family members. So they're outside of the temporary foreign worker and the international student. There's also the permanent resident. Now, if you received your COPR and your permanent residency visa before March 18th, you are allowed to enter Canada now. And so you can now land and obtain your permanent residency stamp upon entry because you are now part of the exemption. Now, there's also another clause, part of that exemption, that was open to the travel ban as well, where it identified immediate family members. And those people pertained to immediate family members of Canadian citizens, immediate family members of Canadian permanent residents. So if you were a permanent resident in Canada, obviously, the Canadian citizen one is an obvious, but if you were a permanent resident in Canada and your spouse, your dependent child was outside of Canada, they now have exemption to come to Canada. Obviously, as visitors, if you haven't already obtained your permanent residency for them through the sponsorship application, or they didn't land prior to and receive their COPR. So they are now allowed to come to Canada under this special exemption. Now, also, under immediate family members, I think there was a misunderstanding on what that meant. So that obviously means your spouse or common law partner, your dependent children, which is anyone under the age of 22, and adopted children, but they've also included parents or step-parents, parents or step-parents, spouse or common law partner, a guardian, or a tutor. So they've included an extension of immediate family member, which normally would not be parents or step-parents, to allow them as well to be part of the intermediate family allowed to come if they have a permanent resident here in Canada with valid status. So there's some confusion on those matters. Now, you cannot flagpole at this time. And so there is still some uncertainty on how you can obtain your COPR status as permanent resident while you're in Canada, because you would need to be able to make contact with someone to do that. And right now, that option is still undefined and you cannot flagpole. So you cannot flagpole to go and get your work permit. If you want to change your status in Canada, you are not able to go to the border and do that at this time. You would have to go online and change the conditions of your status through that process. So that's something to be very clear about. Now, if there's any other questions, I'm just going through what some of them might be. They are continuing to process applications for permanent residency and temporary status in Canada. The processing times, of course, are going to be longer due to the volume of applications, but due to offices being closed down or shortening the staff. And so they are trying to manage this day by day, as I mentioned in the beginning statement of my video. So we all need to be patient, obviously, but they are still processing applications. Now, let's say you have an application in process for permanent residency and you are requiring documentation. Due to the COVID-19 virus and the limitation on being able to obtain biometrics, medicals, police clearances, they are not going to refuse an application due to that. Or for incompleteness. But we still need to state that in the application why those documents were not included if you're making a new application, because they need to be aware that you just didn't obviously omit them. It's just you cannot obtain them due to these measures. Another question that's being asked is, if I've already received my COPR and I can't travel by the validity of that status due to obviously flights, the ban in other countries, international bans, you can then contact IRCC through web form, let them know that you will not be able to meet the deadline of your COPR and PR status. Can you have an extension? And they will then obviously follow through with the new special delivery and operational procedures that they're trying to mandate with the obviously evolving changes. So yes, update IRCC through the web form and let them know that you cannot meet that deadline and the reasons why. So let's see if there's anything else. Postgraduate work permit. So if your DLI has now done their studies online instead of obviously in person, they are now allowing postgraduate work permits to be granted after this due to because before distant learning and online learning was not allowed. But courses of study being delivered online are an exceptional basis due to and will not affect postgraduate work permit applications eligibility. So if you are now being transferred to an online DLI course, you would not be affected and you'd be exempt, and therefore you could still get your postgraduate work permit. Obviously, qualifying factors to that change. And I wouldn't rush to Canada. So you still have to keep in mind that you will be quarantined when you enter Canada under any of these exemptions for 14 days. If you are experiencing any symptoms, you will not be allowed to get on an airplane and you will not be allowed to land in Canada. So please keep that in mind. But yes, once you get to Canada, you will be quarantined for 14 days, self-quarantined, and you must maintain those special measures because they are enforcing them much stricter now, and they will be checking in on people who've landed on international flights into Canada to make sure that they are abiding by the self-quarantine of 14 days. So right now, I think that's pretty much the changes that have come into effect and some maybe misunderstanding or misinformation. If you do have any more questions or concerns, please contact me through my WhatsApp at 780-231-7552. You can also reach me on my Facebook page, Fortitude Immigration Consulting, my website. You can contact me through Twitter. There's many avenues, and I'll be more than happy to try to answer them the best that I can through the evolving changes and maybe misunderstandings of how things are interpreted, as we are trying to all learn the changes as we go along. So try to be patient, and the government is working diligently trying to help everybody. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thanks very much. Stay safe, everybody.